know Brother Finney, and many of you don't. It's been 2 years since he was with us. The last time he was here, I think it was in February of 2014, and we walked out here that day. The platform wasn't here. We walked out here, and there was about 6 inches of ice and snow on the floor where right now. He's never seen the auditorium like this, and so this is a new experience for him. But we are thrilled to have Brother Finney back with us. He's been a help and a blessing to our church. I got to meet Brother Finney. I was trying to figure it out today. I think it's been 14 years ago. He's been an acquaintance and a friend of the Story family for many, many, many years. But I didn't get to meet him until about 14 years ago. We'd been married for just about a year. And we went down to Brother Bobby Leonard's fellowship meeting. And I believe, if I remember right, I believe it was on a Tuesday night that Brother Bobby had Brother Finney preach. And I remember the message very easy. You preach from, actually I'm not even going to say, maybe we'll preach that tonight. And I don't want you to change your message if I say which one you preach, because it was a good message. But I remember it very, very well. And it was a blessing to us. And then to be able to ask Brother Finney to come and preach for us about 8 years ago was the first time he's been to Faith Baptist Church. And he's been a blessing every single time. And my heart is ready. I'm excited to have him with us again. Now, I want you to get your Bibles out. I want you to give him your absolute best attention, and then let the Lord work in your life through what he has to say from the Word of God. Would you do that? If you would, say amen. All right, Brother Finney, you come help yourself tonight, please.
God bless you. Thank you, Pastor. I'm the one that's excited and very much honored to be back, and thrilled that I'm able to see such good improvements round about here. It's wonderful to see what God has raised up for you. I thank the Lord for this nice building. I do not know who is responsible for such a nice prophet's chamber, but whoever it is, thank you so much for that. I love being right on the grounds. When I'm in a meeting, it's far superior in my mind to be right here than to be in a motel. And so I thank you for that kindness. Also, I appreciate the good choir. I have no earthly idea exactly what your scheduling may be for the week. That's, of course, your affair and your business. But if I have my way, I'd love to hear that choir every evening. I love the ministry of a choir. I think that God uses a choir in a special way. Many churches have gone away from choir singing, and they have hurt themselves. The Lord has been kind through all of these many years to give the church different areas of talents among its people. And I just don't think that we're wise to farm that out to some kind of music brought in from outside when the Lord has so much good talent sitting in our church. And I believe he uses God's people in that fashion. Doesn't it mean something to you in a special and unique way when you hear people that you know singing those songs? Makes a real difference to us. And thank you for the good choir singing tonight. Also, I appreciate the pastor and his direction round about here. I've been pastoring where I am, the only place I've ever pastored, for now 32 years. I've grown old there, and I still promise you, I would never ask people to move from their seat. After 32 years, I think if I told them that the Lord had directed me when I got back to Conestee for us to somehow just all of us go out and jump off the Great Wall of Conestee, I think many of them would follow me, but I doubt very seriously they're going to give up their pew. I never would have said anything, Pastor, if you hadn't already made mention about it. But I do appreciate you getting right here tonight. That kind of helps me. I'll do my best to get maybe there with you. Now, I'm not as young as I used to be, and I'm having some trouble with one of my legs, and I've noticed, I counted here, I believe that you put 6 steps to get up here. And you probably did that with the intention of keeping us southern preachers up here because we have a tendency to drift into your face. from time to time. Unless the Lord really calls on me to do that, I'll probably stay up here. Or if I get down there, I'll probably not come back up here. One of the two. All right. I would ask you, if you would please, to turn with me to Psalm 55 this evening. Okay, now let's go to Genesis chapter 18. I could read your minds. It's as though the wheels were turning. Is this man going to preach the same thing he preached to us last night? I'm so thankful for your pastor letting me in on the fact that he did what he did last evening. It would be a terrible thing. In my younger days as a preacher, the Lord allowed me the privilege to be around quite a bit, evangelist Billy Kelly. And we traveled some together. I enjoyed being a part of his ministry and just really being around such a good man of God. I do remember that in those latter days, though, he came in on Monday evening and he preached a message, and came back on Tuesday evening and preached the exact message. And all of us were so kind that we said nothing. So tonight, if you've ever, this is not the first time I've ever tried to preach out of this text. If you've ever heard me deal with this text in Genesis chapter number 18, just sit there real nice and smile as though you've never heard it before, and do your best to glean something new from it. I want to preach tonight, by the help of God, on this matter of servitude. I don't know that I could be called on of the Lord to deal with anything that would be more important to us as God's people. We have now for many years in our society been accustomed to living such a grand lifestyle that we have this abhorrence within us when we think about servitude. And yet one of the greatest honors that's ever been afforded to any man or woman is to be able to serve the great God of glory. Now, to be a servant to some difficult individual, maybe a tyrannical idiot, would probably be an extreme chore. I'm certain that it would. I could learn quickly to detest a difficult master. But when I'm thinking about the Lord Jesus Christ and God the Father, I really have no problem submitting myself to servitude because they've always been so good to me. I have never been treated any way except good, and I've always been bettered at their ministry in my life. So tonight, I want to challenge each of us tonight to be the kind of servant that we ought to be for the Lord Jesus Christ. I have found this to be true as well, that when I am a correct servant of the Lord, I end up serving man better. I serve everything around me better. To serve the Lord is to make you not only one that is pleasing unto the Lord, but one who is really a better individual. Now look with me, if you will, in chapter number 18, verse number 1. And the Lord appeared unto him, speaking of Abraham, in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground. As best as we can determine, now this divine visitation that Abraham is afforded is given to him in the express imagery of 3 distinct individuals. This divine personage, I believe, is none other than the Lord himself. And as he approaches now the tent door, he makes it very clear. We would draw from this maybe that we're talking about angels only, except for the fact that the Bible says in verse number 1 that the Lord appeared unto him. And so clearly we have now this unusual event, a very rare event in the life of Abraham. Verse number 3, and he said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on, for therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do as thou hast said. And Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it and make cakes upon the hearth. And Abraham ran unto the herd and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it unto a young man, and he hasted to dress it. And he took butter and milk, and not buttermilk. Very important that you make the distinction. He took butter and milk, and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. As I made mention to you, in verse number 3 and in verse number 5, we see this thought of Abraham being a servant. This interests me greatly in that he becomes a self-proclaimed servant. It's not like he's having to be coerced. Nobody's having to challenge this man. Nobody's having to offer him trinkets. He's sitting there, and all of a sudden, when he recognizes this is a presence of the Lord, he volunteers quickly to be a servant. I desire from my heart to be that way. I want to be the kind of person that doesn't have to be drawn or coaxed. I want to be the kind of Christian that when I recognize that the Lord is kind in showing me favor with his presence, that I would eagerly want to serve him in whatever capacity. Whatever I notice that this man volunteers quickly. There are some things that make that amazing to me. One is that he has plenty. This is a wealthy man. Abraham is probably the wealthiest man in all of the region. God has so elevated him and helped him financially. He owns many things. He's been made great by God, and yet he says, I'll serve. It's not that easy for wealthy people to see themselves as servants. Not only does he have plenty, but this man is a man of great position. He's a patriarch. Now, most people of great position would love to retain that status. They don't want to be seen in any other capacity. They love what they have attained. Abraham has now come up. God has raised him up, and he has great positioning in all of the land. And yet he says, I have this desire, and that is that I would simply be a servant. So he has plenty. He has great position. He has extreme power. This man is a powerful man. I would imagine that there are countless numbers of servants that he can command just like that. And yet he wants to be a servant. Oh, that God would give me this kind of heart. There's another thing that makes this even more amazing to me, and that is he's not a youngster anymore. When I was young, it was a little easier for me to volunteer to serve. I felt good. I didn't have all of the things going against me that I have now. It seemed as though it was just an adventure for me to just want to serve the Lord. But as we get older, we have 1,000 excuses that seem to plague our world. Here is a man, I do want to remind you, that is 100 years old, and yet he's the one who volunteers to serve. He could command a little servant of his to go and take care of these men and everything that I want done, but that's not sufficient. He could delegate it quickly, point it out for someone else to do, because he is now an aged man. And nobody would think hard of him. They would all say, well, we don't want you doing the hard work of running out into the field. We don't want you out in that Middle Eastern sun running that kind of risk. We'll do it for you. But he saw it as such a privilege that he didn't want somebody else to do it. He wanted the privilege to do it himself, even in his old age. I have begged the Lord even recently. I let our church in on this. I bowed, and it's a little more difficult to bow. I appreciate your pastor bringing us men here around this altar and having us bow. I bowed recently, and I tried to get real honest with God again. And I said, Lord, I can remember back in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, when I would lay out in the pine thickets and between corn rows, and I would say, dear God, I just want to be whatever you want me to be. I can remember crying and my tears there in the dirt, laying on my stomach before God, on my face before God, and saying, Lord, please, could you just in some fashion use the likes of me, please? And now the Lord's been so good to me through these years, not because I'm worthy or capable even, but just in His mercy. He's allowed me the privilege to serve Him. And recently I bowed and I said, dear God, I'm not that youngster anymore. My hair's turned white, my gait's slower. I hurt more now. I feel as though I'm not as emotionally strong as I once was. But God, I don't want to lose that heart. I don't want to lose that same desire that I had in my youth to serve my God. I don't ever want it to be gone from me. Abraham said, it doesn't matter how old I am, you can't have my position. I'm not going to give it up to some youngster. I'm not going to give it up to somebody else. It's my privilege, and I'm going to grab hold of it. Even as an aged man, he desired simply to serve. This also intrigues me about this picture. Not only is he an aged man and a very powerful man, a man of great wealth and means, a man with position, but Abraham is a man that in his life, he is now serving the Lord at the end of his life, looking at this as an extreme privilege. And he says, I'd love to be nothing more than a waiter. We're going to hear this drum beat. It has already begun. It'll drive us crazy before we have the opportunity to vote for a president. And we will hear politician after politician tell us over and over and over again how that they simply want to serve. They just really want to serve the country. They want to serve us as a people because they have such gaping hearts of love. Now, I have a little news flash tonight. They're serving and then they're serving. there is a huge difference between serving as a waiter at a table in the restaurant and serving as one who pillows your head on satin in the White House. Huge difference. This man said, I don't have to have the high-level servitude. I will be more than satisfied if God will just let me serve Him in the base levels of servitude. Now, right here, I really need to do some preaching right here, and I don't think I can do it this far away. But I've been preaching to Baptist people for a lot of years, ever since 1979. And I promise you that it is shocking at how important positions are and titles are. I've been at the same church for 32 years. I'm out somewhere preaching away from the home church every other week of the year. And in doing so, and that's simply because of the fact that that's all I'm going to schedule while I'm pastoring. And while I'm doing that, I'm amazed at how important these titles are to us. I'm amazed at how easily we can become offended if our name is not mentioned. Abraham is way beyond that. This is no kindergarten servitude he's talking about. Abraham says, I'm a great man only because God made me great. I have wealth only because God gave me wealth. I'm a patriarch only because God made me a patriarch. And if God Almighty would just let me be nothing but a little waiter, I'm going to be glad to do it. And as soon as the divine visitation, as soon as the Lord said to him, okay, we'll stay the evening, boom, I catch him running. He's moving to get it done. He's thrilled with the prospect. There are three areas of this servitude that I think we can learn from. First is the swiftness in which I see him move. I want you to notice with me, the Bible says in verse 2, it says he ran. In verse 6, hastened quickly. In verse 7, ran, hasted. The entire movement now has picked up great speed. Just as soon as the Lord told him, well, sure, if you want to serve in that capacity, I'll let you. Boom, he went running. He's moving at it. Now, some would say, exactly why is that important? Well, I think it's important for a couple of reasons. One being, Abraham had insight that allowed him to understand that this kind of thing doesn't happen every day. If he's going to have the privilege to serve, he's going to have to seize the moment that's been given to him. He's going to have to grab hold of it right now. Could I remind you of something? Now, I think this is true. The Lord could correct me when I get to heaven one day, but then it'll be so late it won't matter to any of us. But it's not recorded anywhere else. This man has lived on planet Earth 100 years, and God has never visited his house before. God has never come down and said, I believe I'll spend the evening with you, Abraham. I think I could ask this entire congregation tonight. How many times has that ever happened with you? Now, I understand spiritually that the Lord lives with us and we have this unique privilege of his presence all the time. When was the last time God the Father came down? Came out to your house, knocked on the door, and said, I believe I'll take a meal with you this evening. This kind of thing doesn't happen every day. This is an unusual event. This is the kind of thing that if he doesn't seize the moment, it could be gone. My life has pivoted on two moments in time that I can go back and connect. And everything I am, everything I do rests on those two pivot points. One was as a renegade, angry teenager when, thanks be to God, I trusted Jesus as my Savior. And that began to move my life in a totally different direction. The second of those was when I found myself sitting in my little home church, which wouldn't have had more than 55 or 60 people on a jam-up Sunday. And in that little church, we were having revival, and our pastor had brought in an evangelist, and he was preaching, and I had certainly been contemplating preaching for quite some time. I'd been praying about it. I had already told God I don't want to be a rebel, but I don't want to shame you either. I need to know, I need to really know what you want to do with my life. I don't want to be a mockery. I have a desire to serve, but I don't want to do it in the flesh. And so I'm sitting on a little pew in a little obscure church in Walnut Cove, North Carolina. And God Almighty made it clear to me that He wanted me to spend my life doing what I'm doing tonight. I can remember having the thoughts over and over. There are so many other men that are far better at this kind of thing than I could ever be. And yet the Lord extended me the invitation. I wonder if I had let that moment go by. At the close of that service that night, I went quickly into an altar. I remember clearly telling the Lord, I will preach. He just made it so clear to me. I said, I will preach. And then I tossed this in as a bonus. I said, I will preach in Africa if you want me to. Now, the only reason I mentioned Africa is because I didn't really know geographically any place further away than that. So I was just basically laying it all on the line because I knew that moment was that unique. I preached to people across the land and at home, and I watched them, and I see God deal with their hearts in a moment of time. I have preached to many of our young people through the years, and I see when God deals with that heart and gives them that opportunity. This is what I want you to do with your life. This is your privilege to serve. And I watch them sit around and contemplate that thing and push it aside. There's one young man that tonight I would not give you his name, that his life became an absolute wreck. And after him spending time in the penitentiary, I sat down with him and I said to him, do you have any idea where you derailed? Here's what he said to me. I have more than just an idea. God made it clear to me where my life derailed. And He carried me back to a point in time sitting in our church when God Almighty revealed to him exactly what He wanted him to do. He wanted him to go to Bible college at a certain place, and he said, I came up with at least a half dozen reasons why that wasn't the best thing for me to do. And he said, when I was in prison, he said, I finally got in that corner of that little cell by myself, just with God Almighty. And I said, Lord, how could I have gone from where I was to where I am? What happened? And He said, God said to me, remember that moment. Remember that moment when I showed up in your world. He said, oh yes, preacher, I know exactly where I derailed. I'm telling you, it ought to so overwhelm us anytime God Almighty will speak to our hearts, who will come near to us, will make Himself known to us and His will known to us, so much so that we ought to grab for it, hang on to it, take advantage of it. It may not just be something that will ever come by again. So he seized the moment. There's another reason why he moved so swiftly. And this is pretty simple. You're not going to have to be a rocket scientist to get this one. He's 100. Biologically, it's about over. If he's going to do something for God, he better get at it now. Now, I mean, God comes to him, and I'm sure he probably had these thoughts like one of my deacons some years ago who was already in his 40s. He was close to 50, and God moved into his world, called him to preach, and then called him to the mission field. And I'm sure that Abraham had these thoughts. Boy, it sure would have been nice if the Lord had come by this tent when I was 35. Now I'm 100. If I don't move quickly now, I may not have the opportunity at all. But I want us to all realize something tonight. My biological clock is ticking. I had the thoughts a moment ago when I bowed in the prophet's chamber. But I asked God for help again tonight. I said, dear God in heaven, only you know. My wife was at home. My son had been able to come by, and she sent me a little old picture of him clowning around, him and her, and just having fun. And he lives 5.5 hours away. I don't get to see him much anymore. And I had this little thought when I knelt and prayed, and I said, Lord, as far as I know, I could never even get to hug his neck again. I may never even make it back from Michigan. Have no earthly idea. As far as I know, I'm healthy enough to make it back. But how far do you know? How far do any of us know? It is a privilege to serve God, one that we should grab hold of because we never know when our time is up. We've heard it said often, if you're going to do anything for God, probably better get at it. Probably better get at it. But you know the sad thing is that most of us, when we're referencing those thoughts, we're talking about how that time seems to be getting so bad and running out in our country, and how that we're just, getting in these latter times. We don't really think about how that if we're going to do anything, we better get at it, because truth is, I'm the one getting out of here. You're the one getting out of here. So hard to grab hold of that when you're young. It starts becoming crystal clear later. Abraham saw it at 100. He said, I better move swiftly. Swiftly. Good servants move swiftly. Secondly, servants must learn to sacrifice. They must learn to sacrifice. I cannot be a decent servant of the Lord until He has taught me the reality of sacrificing. Look at verse number 1 again in your Bible. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door, and notice, God said, He's there in the heat of the day. Well, He's there in the heat of the day because all of them are. Nobody works in that Middle Eastern region with the kind of work that they're having to do in that nomadic region. Nobody works in the middle of the day. The sun is bearing down on them, and they just can't take it. Now, what He's actually done is come over in the middle of the day, and to help us understand it, they didn't call it this, but it is siesta time. He's in the tent door, sitting there. He no doubt has pulled the flap up on the other side of the tent, creating what little bit of breezeway that would be across the desert floor. And he is now in his comfort zone. He has found a shaded place in a difficult land. But if he's going to serve God, he has to come out of that comfort zone. He has to give it up. He has to be one who's willing to walk away from the creature comforts so that he can serve the Lord. He cannot get the calf. He cannot prepare the meal. He cannot set the table. He cannot wait the table until he first sacrifices. Time and time again, Pastor, I have young pastors that are constantly, when I'm with them, they're crying and belly aching and whining, and they remind me so much of myself years ago. They're constantly saying, nobody wants to do anything, and I can't get anybody going. And I think that I'm the only one that wants to do anything. And yes, you are, brother. I believe that a young man of God is having his best days when he realizes that God is going to require of him to do this if he's going to be a good servant, and that's give it all up. Give it all up. I mentioned to you a moment ago when I laid on that altar, here's what I was really saying. Nobody in my family had ever gone past high school. Nobody in my family had ever made any money. My people were poor. My wife's people were poor. I can remember clearly when we were first married, I would look around and I had a lot of zeal and I had a lot of desire. And I would say, if other men made money, I'll figure out how to make money. I will give my wife some things she's never had. I can remember thinking back about when it was just me and my mother because my drunkard father had walked off and left us for his barroom maids. And my mother picking up 3 jobs so she wouldn't have to put me in an orphanage. And I would say to myself, I will accomplish making some money. My mother will not have to live like that in her old age. That's not going to happen. If another man can make it, I can make it. Somehow I'll figure it out. And I'm telling you, I was running in this direction, that direction, that direction, that direction, trying to accomplish all kinds of things. Had 3 different businesses going at one time, and one of them failed so bad that it sunk all the rest of the ships. But I stayed with it, and I kept at it. But one thing that God required of me when I crawled up in that altar that night was I had to give up all that ambition. And I remember saying to the Lord, as best as I know how to do this, I'm giving you everything. My desires do not matter anymore. I'm trusting you. I want to serve you. I'll do what you told me to do. And then he tested me with that thing. And it was less than a year later I buried my son. Then he sent me off to Bible college, had me break from a good job, good benefits, liquidate everything I had, sold everything I had, and went to live in a place where I didn't know anybody, living in a single wide trailer in a trailer park, and looking at my little wife after I told her, darling, I'll change your life if you'll just marry me. I'll do something good for you. And here I am now wondering if I could even provide a box of cornflakes. In fact, got down to where couldn't. And God Almighty fed us through the mailbox and out of the hands of strangers. I remember those days. But a servant must learn to sacrifice, or they'll never be a good servant. And I'm not the quality of servant today that I ought to be. But I promise you this, I know enough about servitude to know that until we're willing to say, dear God, it's you plus nothing. I give it all up for you. Until we get there, we are poor servants of the Lord Jesus Christ. Abraham teaches me this lesson, that sacrificing is a vital part of servitude. Not only did he sacrifice that comfort zone, but he sacrificed the very best that he had. The Bible said he went out there into the herd. Now, I'm assuming that's his herd. I doubt he ran to his neighbor's herd. It's easy to sacrifice your neighbor's cow. So he runs out there and he finds the prettiest little calf that he has, the one that would bring him the most money, the one that would be the best. It's the most tender. That's the one he gives to the Lord. He does not bring the bent cans back to the Lord. He brings the best he has. It's called first fruits. And until God gets our first, we're poor servants. Abraham is teaching me here. He teaches me through his swiftness. He teaches me through his sacrifice. But he also teaches me something about servitude in his standing. Now, to me, this is quite interesting. I want you to look with me what the Bible says in verse number 8. And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. What an interesting thing. He assumes the position of the waiter. He took the lowest part of servitude. He was glad to get it. He was thrilled that God would just let him do that. He didn't see himself worthy to be a greater servant. Just let me be the waiter. He runs. He sacrifices. He puts the meal together. And then he stands back while the three sit and eat. And the Bible says he just stands there. I was preaching some time back outside of Indianapolis, and there's a man in the church there who is a very wealthy man. The Lord's blessed him in many ways, and he had told the pastor that he'd love to carry us out for a meal one day, and so the pastor agreed. I was glad that he did. Normally, I eat at McDonald's a lot and Wendy's. This man didn't want to go to Wendy's. He asked me, he said, "Have you ever been to a Brazilian steakhouse?" I said, "No, never have. I had no idea that Brazilian cows were any different than American cows. No idea." He said, "I want you to go. I want you to have the experience." And so we went downtown Indianapolis into a very beautiful restaurant. And when I got in, I was taken back by these waiters that were in there. They were standing everywhere. It's like they had hired 3 times more waiters than any other restaurant I've ever been into. And all of them had these white pants on. They were poofy like Aladdin. I liked it. And they had this apron on them, and they were standing to attention at each table. When we were taken to our table, I couldn't help but peep, and I noticed I had one. I had a waiter. I have to watch myself in things like that because, well, I'm from South Carolina, and I just don't get around that kind of stuff. And so I watch everybody else at the table, and I noticed that everybody had a little disc laying there. And that little disc, I'm trying to remember the colors. I think it was red and green. I'm just not certain, but I believe that's right, red and green. And mine's laying on red, and I'm wondering what that thing's for, so I'm kind of milling around there and just, getting my bearings and watching everybody else. And I see a fellow at the other table. He flips his disc, and his little waiter comes running over there. "Yes, sir, may I help you?" And I thought to myself, I wonder if my disc works. So I just slipped my hand over there. I flipped that disc, and boom, here's Aladdin right there. Just that fast. He says, "Sir, may I help you? I said, no. I was just wondering if it worked. I'm fine, really, right now. That fast he was moving to my need. I see Abraham the same way. It's like he's standing to attention. I wonder so many times what God has to do to shake up my world, to get my attention at the need to serve Him. I wonder how many times He's had to really rattle my cage to kind of wake me up in my lethargy or whatever, to where I can actually see that I could potentially serve. But Abraham, nobody's going to have to rouse him. You will not have to come behind him with a cattle prod. Abraham is ready. He is looking for the opportunity. It's amazing, as pastors, we try to figure out thousands of ways how that we can get people excited and moving, and how that we can kind of charge people up and maybe delegate and tap the right person so that we can get something done around the church. And the scene that I see here is that if all of us were like Abraham, we'd be sitting around saying, what can I do? What can I do? Is there something? Let me look. Let me keep my eyes open. Let me beg for it. It's been a long time since anybody's come up to me at the First Baptist Church of Conestee and begged for something to do. A long time. He's standing there doing this. I appreciate the fact that he's on high alert and wanting it, desiring it. But I also appreciate where he's standing. Now, let me tell you something about serving. When you preach about it, it's glamorous. When you get involved with it, it's a lot of work. And it's tough. I mean, that sacrificing is real. That running around is real. It takes its toll on us. It's costly. It's impossible to do it without wearing something out. And many times in serving, we write books about it. We read books about it.
Better be careful. Serve too much, you're going to burn out. 10 steps how to keep from burning out. Don't smell somebody else's fumes. On and on and on it goes. Because serving is really hard. It's really difficult. You sacrifice your own desires. You're always at someone else's bidding. And it seems like sometimes the things that you're asked to do are the most difficult tasks, and they're the most menial things, and even humiliating. Here's the patriarch now with an apron on. Okay? The patriarch with an apron on. And God seems to be pleased with it. Serving is not attractive. It is difficult. And it wears on us. And sometimes we can become badly jaded and end up bitter. Some of the best servants I've ever known have ended up at the end of the way useless because serving made them bitter. So the place in which he stood could have some importance. Did you notice the text in verse number 8? Interesting to me. It says he stood by them under the tree. If I'm going to serve my Lord, and if I'm not going to get bitter in my serving, if I'm not going to become worn out and burn out in my serving, if the toil of it is not going to take its toll on me, then I'm going to have to stay back up under the tree and remember why I'm doing what I'm doing. And when I'm talking about the tree, I'm talking about the cross. As long as I serve with the right motive, I think the best way to not burn out is to make sure the motive stays correct. If I stay back up in under the tree, if I recognize that He gave all for me, and the reason that I'm serving is not so somebody else can see this or that, or so that I can build a big church or have my name somewhere in lights or any of those things, all of those things are what causes us our frustrations. If I am serving simply because of Him, if my service is nothing more than a little cool drink of water, but if it's in His name, then I can keep serving and keep serving and keep serving. Our motive must be pure. Don't do it just because the preacher warned you to, because you will wear out. Don't do it just because you think, well, it's the right thing to do. You know, it's amazing how we can do what we believe is the right thing to do, and it is the right thing to do, and we do it long enough and hard enough, and you're exhausted. But you can do the same thing, doing it for Him, and it seems like you breathe fresh air. Now, I don't want to ruin this by bringing in some lousy analogy, but I'm telling you, it's about like those NASCAR when they're running. You need clean air. And that clean air comes when you get in the right location. You get under the cross, and it helps us serve. Get close to Him. Can I give you a couple of advantages that comes to servants? And I'm finished. One is this. Servants apparently get visitations from the Lord when other people do not. Abraham is not the only one living in that area, but he's the only one God comes and visits with. And you know that God, knowing all things, He knows that this man has a servant's heart. And so I'm going to his house. I'm going to his house. He's my friend because he has a servant's heart. I'm going to his house. Everybody else around there didn't have this event happen to them at all. I believe God visits with people who serve Him. If you do it for Him, whatever it is, however small it is, and however exhausting it is, it's going to be like a breath of fresh air to you because you're doing it because you love Jesus Christ. And when you do it like that, something about that causes Him to want to embrace you. And He comes and visits with you. He may even get in your little car with you and ride down the road a spell. He may go along with you a mile or two. He may slip down to your house while everybody else is gone. Or He may slip in there when all of a sudden you didn't expect Him and all the family's still at home, and here you come crying and weeping and praising God down through the hall of the house. And they don't have a clue even in the home what's going on, but you just had a visitation from the Lord. I'm telling you, He visits those who have servants' hearts. And it's just great to live my life being able to say that thanks be to God, every now and then He's shown up around my world. And I don't deserve that, and you don't deserve that, but when He does it for us, it's good. It's really good. Secondly, remember this. Anytime He ever visits with you, He's going to leave you better off than you were when He came. The text starts now in verse number 9, and I'm not going to read it for you. We all know the story, don't we? The Lord says, all right, I'm going to give you a child. Now, Sarah's back there, and she hears that, and she says, I'm way past childbearing, and she laughs at that thing. But laugh or not, I'm telling you, if God ever says it, it's a done deal. 9 months from then, they got the baby boy. I mean their heart's desire. God Almighty not only visits with those who have a servant's heart, but God Almighty will always bless your world. You'll be better off after the visit than you were before. It's a beautiful thing to serve God. It's a wonderful opportunity. Long for it. Want it. Desire it more than your physical food. Every now and then try to say it to Him. Dear Lord, is there something that you'd let me do? And just do it for you. Not for the church. Not for my preacher. But for you. Please stand. I'm through preaching tonight. Heads are bowed. Musicians are coming. Altars are open tonight. My Heavenly Father, I beg, I plead, I want to be the first one tonight that would bow. And to the best of my ability, even here in a public setting, I want to ask you, Lord, please help me to serve you as I ought. Please help me to recognize my opportunities, my privileges. Please, dear God in heaven, help me to do it for Thee. In Jesus' name. Heads are still bowed and eyes are closed. Music's just being played. People are in the altars. How about you tonight? Mother, Dad, one of the best gifts you can give those children is to be a servant of the Lord. Young person, how about you tonight? Just in the stillness of the moment, while others are praying, the Lord will allow you some personal time with Him. That's right. While many pray, there's opportunity for you. There's space and time now. Is this your moment, sir? Ma'am, is this your moment? Better seize it. Has the Lord touched your heart about being a servant? It wasn't just that the preacher said a word. Has God said a word to you tonight? Well, I'm telling you, if you present yourself before Him, you just never know what He might let you do. How He may let you be involved in His work in some way. I'm going to find me a place to pray, and while these are praying, Pastor, you come right ahead.
We'll sing a verse of something in a moment. I don't doubt that with a message on service and servitude, every single heart has felt a touch of some sort. And my dad used to say, and I'm sure it wasn't original with him, but he used to say, God's not necessarily looking for the most qualified, He's just looking for the most willing. That could include you. It could. If you want to be at the altar tonight, you come on. It's open. You have time to come right now. Maybe you're here this evening and you don't know for sure that the Lord Jesus Christ is your Savior. Maybe you don't know what it means to be saved and you'd like to. Well, we'd sure love to pray with you about that. I'd love to. If you were to slip out of your seat and come to the altar this evening, we'd be happy to pray with you. We won't embarrass you. We wouldn't do that to you. Brother Dick, what page? Page 816 in your hymn book. We'll sing a couple of verses together. The altar's open. You come as we sing. right, you can look this way. Thank you, Brother Finney, for the message tonight. We're going to receive an offering right now. Brother Jerry, just as soon as y'all are ready, come on, we'll get our offering tonight.